1980 was a strong year for Roger Corman's New World Pictures. Battle Beyond the Stars, which I reviewed earlier this year, showed the greatness the studio could achieve if they supported their up-and-coming artists with an actual budget. Then there was Humanoids from the Deep, an absolute mess of a picture with problematic content galore, and yet... Well, okay, let's go over the basics first. Notables in the opening credits include composer James Horner, who elevated Battle Beyond the Stars with his terrific orchestral score. Later we'll learn that the effects were done by the likes of Rob Bottin and Kenny Myers. Also notable that this film is directed by a woman, Barbara Peters. Certainly not something you saw a lot of during those days. A boat from the fishing town of Noyo, and go ahead and try to make your own YOLO jokes for that one, I couldn't produce one I was proud of, ends up hooking something it shouldn't have. It's probably a humanoid from the deep. Just a hunch. Things go very wrong for that boat. Whatever got hooked is plenty pissed now, and aside from everyone on board the splody boat, the first kills of the movie are a kid and like 9 dogs. What kinds of sadistic fucks wrote this thing? Cat scare, fuck off, movie. There's actually a lot of fake scares like that in the first act of this movie. Characters bumping into dishes, causing them to scream, and then turning around and bumping into a dish towel, which also causes them to scream. This town of Noyo delivers a lot of local flavor as there's a canning company, Canco, that wants to open up in town. Its efforts are being led by Vic Morrow, who is shitty with a capital S. He and his goons are feuding with a local Native American, which of course escalates to ridiculous levels of violence because entitled white people.
Look out!
That's the backdrop for the events of the film, while something or some things are rampaging about, murdering fools.
Jerry? Jerry? Come on, Jerry. Jerry?
Wow, that's one hell of a makeup job for the era. That's really terrific. There's an absolutely goofy sex scene involving a ventriloquist dummy that turns to death quickly and equally as silly, which I can't show because the lady's groovy 70s boobs are, really nude. It's around this point where the humanoids appear to be kind of rapey, which, ew. This is unnecessary, Roger Corman, you sick fuck. As the humanoid crisis escalates, so does the Vic Morrow squad, deciding they'll silence their Native American foe by lobbing a Molotov cocktail at his house, which apparently is built out of napalm. The population starts to catch wind of what's really going on as we finally get a good look at the creatures. Their heads are pretty impressive effects, but the rest of the costume sometimes just looks like dudes in garbage bags.
You're not.
No! Don't shoot! Not yet.
Drake. Festival.
Oh my God.
Of course there's a local festival. Gotta warn everybody at the local festival, but it's too late. Mayhem time at the festival, all of which is pretty great. The chaos that ensues and the filmmaking around it is fascinating to watch. Once you realize they're using the festival Ferris wheel for a crane shot, you can't help but want to pat this movie on the back. This one kid throws a flaming torch at one, which produces surprisingly good results. Now, somehow randomly a shower scene is inserted into this chaos before we finally get some humanoids vision in the last few minutes. The humans get the upper hand as day breaks, and then the movie ends on some hot bullshit without any kind of resolution, and on top of all that, Vic Morrow's character survives. Boo. Now, all that being said, I really enjoyed Humanoids from the Deep. Sure, it's pure nonsense from start to finish with haphazard filmmaking and the tone is all over the place, but there are enough moments along the way to recommend it. Just know that it's gross. Really gross. And not just with the weird humanoid thrusting and implied impregnation subplot going on, which believe me is unsettling as hell, but also the simple acts of violence in this are really startling. I actually exclaimed, "Whoa!" out loud on several occasions at the sudden violent moments in this. And while the basic story is fine, it's all the details and characters along the way that seem paper thin. Characters just seem to come and go without any kind of through line. Hell, you could argue that this film doesn't even really have a main character. It's supposed to be Doug McClure, but he goes missing from time to time, and when he's here, he's just not contributing much. So, if you grab Shout Factory's Blu-ray for Humanoids from the Deep, all will be revealed. If you do, though, just be aware that this is an early Shout Factory release, and the final product isn't as polished as some of their recent stuff. First, let's talk about the 7 minutes of deleted scenes on the disc that are in rather remarkable shape, although some of them are missing audio. The first bit seems to be ripping off the opening of Jaws, but with much more nudity involved. I can't believe that got cut, considering how much TNA is in the actual film. And the second is a sex scene. I can't believe that got cut either. Now we get to the meat of things, though, with a 22-minute collection of interviews featuring Roger Corman, Kenny Myers, editor Mark Goldblatt, and others. Corman explains what he wanted, which was a film about monsters who kill all the men and rape all the women. And he repeats this over and over. Director Barbara Peters finished the film, and what Corman and others noticed was that the men were all dying in truly grotesque ways, and the rapes were happening off camera, which is where they should happen, honestly, if not at all, you sick fuck. Also, they noticed that the film just wasn't Roger Corman-y enough, so this resulted in a couple of the assistant directors going back and shooting a bunch of new footage to be inserted every few minutes or so throughout. This explains why characters come and go, and why everything feels totally disjointed. Understandably, the original director and some of the cast were pretty upset about this, thinking they'd shot a thriller called Beyond the Darkness, and then it gets released as a totally different exploitation film called Humanoids from the Deep. Some people went public with their disgust, and director Peters never worked for Roger Corman again. Also explained is how the effects team basically had one great suit and then two that were simply serviceable. There were never more than 3 suits total, so during all the mayhem of the finale, when you think there are dozens of these things, there were never more than 3. Elsewhere, you've got a brief interview segment with Roger Corman and Leonard Maltin, and the usual assortment of trailers and things. Despite being an early effort, it's a great disc, and this movie is goofy fun. Definitely recommended.
He's still going! Get him! Get him!